Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And I'm with Dr. Reza Jorjani today, author of Prometheism and Lovers of Sophia. And guys, this is once in a while I get him on. Last time he was on, everybody loved it. So we're going to go deep this time into Zoroaster and the roots of Gnosticism. You might not know, the roots of Gnosticism are not in Greco-Roman world. They're in the East. They're in Persia. And we're about to demonstrate that in this conversation. So how are you doing today?
It's great to be with you, Neil. I had been meaning to come back on the show earlier, and I do occasionally watch your programs, and really looking forward to this opportunity to familiarize your audience with potentially the Persian origins of Gnosticism.
Yeah, this will be fun. So why don't we start with Zoroaster? Why don't we start with who is he? What is his teachings? There's the Gathas, there's the Ascendavesta. What is it? Let's get to the start of all this and who this guy is. What time period? All that. Right.
So the Gathas are a text that's been, extremely controversial and polarizing in the scholarly community, not only within Iranology or Iranian studies itself, but in the broader field of Indo-European studies. There's been great controversy about the date of this text. And but let me just start with its name for a minute. Gatha, okay, so of course the language in which this text is composed, this ancient Iranian language, is a sister language of Sanskrit. In fact, it's very close to Sanskrit, and this factors into the dating debates over this text. So the word Gatha is a cognate of the word Gita. So Gita, like Bhagavad Gita, Gatha is a cognate of Gita, and it's related to the word Goth in the Germanic languages. So Gothic, Gita, and Gathas are all related, and they have something to do with a hymn of praise. Okay, and having to do with the divine, with God. Gott in German means God, right? Wow. And Gita means sort of a song of praise or hymn of praise. So that's the meaning of the word for this text, the name of this text, and it brings us into the question of dating it based on its linguistics. So wow. The problem is that this language that the Gathas is composed in, and it was believed by some to have been an oral text that was only subsequently written down. I'll tell you why I don't agree with that. But this language is very close to Rig Vedic, okay? So it's like a really ancient form of, similar to an ancient form of Sanskrit, much older than the Sanskrit of the Bhagavad Gitas, older than the younger Upanishads. And so people have assumed, some scholars have, that it dates from like 1500 to 1000 BC. So either slightly older or slightly older than or contemporaneous with the Upanishads, and or with the Vedas, somewhere between the Vedas and the Upanishads. But the problem is that if you compare the Gathas to the Vedas, the level of philosophical complexity in this text and the first person narrative style of it doesn't mesh at all with Rig Vedic culture. Stylistically, what you find in the Gathas is very much of a piece with pre-Socratic philosophy. It reads like Parmenides or Heraclitus or something like that. Okay, it's a profoundly philosophical text, very complex conceptually, and it's also written in the first person, which makes it in a way even more modern than the pre-Socratic Greeks. Right. This is like a guy telling you what he thinks about the world and even mentioning his friends and stuff that he's been through in his life, and not at all in this anonymous mythic, style of composition that we find in the Upanishads or even in Homer or any text of that degree of antiquity. It's almost modern in its style. It's like the idiom that you start to find in classical Athens, and then that becomes very popular in the Roman Empire, okay? So for that reason, I really question, dating this to 1000 to 1500 BC. I also question it because there's a big religious conflict that's depicted in this text. Zarathustra is a rebel against some existing priestly order. He is basically engaging in a kind of spiritual philosophical insurrection against both ritualistic sacrificial priests and these warlord princes. And he calls these the katapon. Katapon is a word that becomes korban later. It means sacrifice, sacrificial, mumbling priests, he calls them. And he means like the way they mindlessly recite all these, hymns and mantras and so forth.
Yeah.
And then these warlord princes called the kavis. And so, people have assumed this refers to Rigvedic priests and the Rigvedic kshatriya or princely class. But actually, if you look in the details of the text, you see it fits much more the context of Scythian Mithraism, the kind of, as he describes them, mad, drunken warlords that go on cattle raids that are the backdrop for the message of the Gathas, fit the Scythian warlords who were coming down into the Persian and Median territories around 700, 600 BC, and raiding the farmlands of the settled population in Persia and Media.
And just to budget it real quick, in case anyone doesn't know, archaeology reflects how widespread these Mithraic temples and places were, from Britain all the way to like Siberia, basically in the Bronze Age. But yeah, I just wanted to just throw that in there.
Yeah. And let me just also throw in a note on a completely different tangent. If anyone hears background noise, I must apologize. I'm in New York City, and being in Manhattan in particular, one of the things you have to deal with is constant construction. There's a huge, hopefully they're going to be on their lunch break right now and we won't have to deal with them, but we'll see. Yeah. In any case, so the backdrop of Zarathustra is ancient Iranian Mithraism, if you ask me. That's what the details of the Gathas really align with. And also we have to consider two events in this man's life. One, his self-exile. Apparently, his message was so revolutionary and he was so badly persecuted for it wherever he was born and raised that he had to migrate over a long distance and accept the patronage of this king called Vishtaspa, this feudal lord or petty king called Vishtaspa, Kavi Vishtaspa, or Ke-Goshtasp in the later Persian. And it appears that the court of Ke-Goshtasp was in present-day Khorasan. That's northeastern Iran, right under Turkmenistan and next to Afghanistan, next to the Afghan border. And so point being, he wasn't from there, okay? There's a debate over where he was from as well. But if that's where Goshtasp's court was, then he came to there from somewhere else, and it lends more credence to the Zoroastrian biographies, later written Zoroastrian biographies that suggest he was from Azerbaijan, from the province of Iran known as Azerbaijan, the ancient name of which was Azarpadagan, meaning the bastion of the fire. And it was a mainly Median territory, and the Magi were the traditional priests of the Medes. So that makes sense. And it makes sense that this guy pissed off Mithraic priests in Media, greater Media, and he had to basically go into self-exile, flee for his life to Khorasan, to northeastern Iran, going towards Central Asia. And so, okay, why is this relevant to the date? Because Zarathustra is killed in some kind of an invasion by people called Turanian in the Shahnameh, in the Iranian national epic. These people are called Turanians. They come from a place called Turan, which is in Central Asia. And this is another name for the Sakas, or the Scythian people. They were descended from a guy called Tur. And so one name for them are the Turanians. We know them in the West as the Scythians. When was there a Scythian rampage like this of Khorasan, where someone like Zarathustra could have been killed? It took place in about, let's say, it was the time when Cyrus the Great had overthrown the Median kingdom, and the Median kingdom, its border had come right up against Central Asia, okay? And so right up against Scythian territory. And when Cyrus the Great, the founder of the first Persian Empire, when he overthrew his grandfather, Astyages of Media, there was this vacuum of power briefly where there was chaos. Nobody knew who was really in charge. And so the Scythians came down and they overran the Medes and the Persians for a brief period of time. So it looks like this puts Zarathustra at the date which, the Zoroastrians themselves claimed he lived. They say that conventional Zoroastrian scriptures say that Zarathustra was 258 years before Alexander. Wow. And what they mean is 258 years, not before the birth of Alexander, but before the coming of Alexander to Iran, before his invasion of the Persian Empire. And so that puts Zarathustra in the generation before Cyrus. So, so this means that Zarathustra was an old man at the time when Cyrus the Great had overthrown, Astyages of Media and was trying to form the Persian Empire. So those dates all align perfectly. And that also puts us right at the dawn of philosophy, right? I mean, these pre-Socratics, Heraclitus, immediately before him, Pythagoras, and so forth, Parmenides after Heraclitus, these are all in the 500s, okay, 500s BC.
Explosion of intellect.
Exactly. So if you put Zarathustra in 1500 or 1000 BC, it doesn't make any sense in terms of the intellectual context. I mean, he would be a total anomaly. If you put Zarathustra at, let's see, what would it be? It would be 628 BC. If we go by the conventional Zoroastrian dating, he would have been born in 628 BC. And that means that considering the fact they claim he composed the Gathas in his 40s, it would have been around 580 BC when Zarathustra composed the Gathas. Well, that's perfect. That would mean that Zarathustra was the first pre-Socratic philosopher. He has the distinction of being the first. And he would then have immediately influenced the subsequent pre-Socratic thinkers, especially as we're going to discuss Pythagoras and Heraclitus. And he would have influenced them by virtue of the fact that the Persian Empire conquered Ionia, which was the Greek bastion of philosophy. So I think this is the proper matrix for dating Zarathustra.